This is Writer Life, a podcast about writing, life, coffee and conversation with Rob and John Morgan.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Writer Life. Today I want to have a look at, the title of the episode is called No Connection to Youth Life. And it's something that I've been involved with for quite a long time in my life. I've done a lot of work behind the scenes, working with young people and talking to them, asking them, what is it in the world that's, not right for you? How do you feel? How do you think? And through that, I think I've gained quite a good insight to teenage life, some of which I've used in the writing of the Curio Chronicles. And so today, for this episode, I want to take a bit of a dive into that, because this is kind of a subject that's close to my heart, and I have included it within the Curio Chronicles stories. So if you have bought the new book and you've read it, you'll know that in the opening chapters of Abigail's wedding, the group of friends known as the Curios walk onto the stage of a very large fundraising event, and they talk to the world on live stream about the need that they feel to reach out and help the young who are taking their lives in unprecedented numbers. Now in the book, the event in the story, which is Curio Live, is an event designed specifically to raise awareness of what is actually a growing trend in the real world today. Birch, who is age 29 in the book, is a qualified clinical psychologist and therapist, and she creates the event and takes the Curios forward in order to reach out to the masses for very vital support. Now, it's an important aspect of the Curio story, and it's one of the many layers of this story which adds to the lives of the group of friends, as I explore many elements of what is early life for youngsters in what is now a modern digital world for today. From an awful lot of the conversations that I've had, one of the most central cores of this issue with the young of today is loneliness and isolation. And I think this is a really crucial aspect of all of the Curio's early life, because it does play a very, very important role in the foundations of the whole series, which is one of the main drivers of the whole core of the bonds that the Curios build and all of the friendships that they form. Now, Birch really does understand this. She is actually the reason behind the driving force of most of the Curios. She creates what we now see as the Curio household, and in many ways it's because Birch has picked up on something that none of the others actually have picked up on. In the first book of the series, it's very easy to see that if you sit back and you actually look at it as the series progresses, you notice there's that core of loneliness in all of them. And through the series, I shed more light on it as I use reflections of the past conversations that they've had in order to highlight how actually isolated and alone this group of friends were before they all came together. And as I look at the world today, and especially my own children, it becomes more apparent how few real friends children today have. It really does appear like most friends seem to be online these days. Very few are actually present in the daily lives of my children. And it's kind of that one-on-one contact appears to have now dwindled as our young tend these days to remain at home, not really going anywhere or doing anything other than staring at a screen. Gaming, live streaming, social media, they've kind of monopolized life to the extent that it has sort of created a bubble that the young are now living in. And they're isolated and they're disconnected from each other, which is not a good thing, really. there does seem today to be kind of this lack of loyalty. The friendships that do form have become based more on how things look, rather than have any kind of form of substance or close bonds. Most friendships today have become what I would term fair weather friendships, because these people, they use each other for comfort and support, and then when they've taken what they needed, the friendship just seems to fizzle out, only to be rekindled should the need arise again. And it all feels very fake and very shallow and actually quite meaningless. Now, in the next book, which is the 5th in the Curio series, I've done a small scene where Edwina is in the kitchen and she's talking to her younger sister Chloe, and I think she highlights this really beautifully. Edwina put down the potato and picked up another unpeeled one. Chloe, I remember Stephanie Johnson and Vanessa Slater and how they influenced you. I hated them, you know. They were fake, shallow bitches, and they used you for their own purposes. I hated the way you plastered makeup all over yourself and had those ridiculous eyebrows and those stupid false nails just to fit in with them. The clothes you bought, they cost you a fortune, and to be honest, they made you look cheap. Chloe gave a gasp. Wow, don't hold back much, Weena. Edwina, she gave a little chuckle. I'm really proud of you, Chloe. I admire you more now than I ever have. I'm thrilled you are my little sister. Chloe stared at her and swallowed hard as she watched her. Edwina smiled back. I watched you walk on stage at the Curio event, and you were just you. Not what your friends thought you should be. You were the girl I knew so well. There was no posh nails, no painted on eyebrows and layers of foundation. And you were just stood there in paint-splattered dungarees and a bikini top. And the thing I loved the most was you were simply being you. God, I was so proud to have you as my sister. I've seen so much of this, not only with my own children, but also with some of the friends that have surrounded my wife. You know, friends come and they take what they need, they use them, and then they just disappear, leaving them isolated and wondering what happened or what did they do wrong. And I really do think this is one of the biggest problems with the interaction of people today. Everything seems to have become about what's in it for me, which is why the Curios are yet another important example of why people need to stop and take a deep look inside and actually see some of the damage that they're actually doing to other people. Far too many people are left sitting at home, lost and alone, and not really understanding what they did to offend someone, which usually, to be honest, is nothing. That's just the way the world has become. It's fake and it's shallow. Birch in the stories is an incredibly pivotal character. She's the most important person in Abby's life. And you have to take a bit of a step back and just look at the start of the Curio series to really understand how everything falls into place. Birch grew up isolated, as we see in book 1. Ronnie talks actually to Abby about how her work created problems for Birch at school, and as a result she's grown up closer to her mother, but not really interacting much with her own generation, apart from her best friend Bev. Now this is actually a really, really important detail, and it sets the stage for the rest of the series, as Birch, even though 19 in the very first book, she is far more grown up because she's seen how her mother is surrounded by friends and colleagues who have very deep, closely bonded relationships, and she kind of yearns for that. Now Birch took a year out after college and travelled the world with Katie, working as a promoter, so she's become far more streetwise and worldwise than any of the other Curios, and she understands the deep bonds of friendship and their actual relevance in modern life. When she first meets Abby at university, and she gets to know her because they share the dorm, she sees that for the first time in her life, she actually has the chance to build something similar to what her mother has with her friends. She does that over the very first year of them living together in the university dorm. Birch sees many things in Abby that she recognizes in her earlier self. And so she understands the isolation and the loneliness of Abby. And through that, she knows that there's actually a potential for a very long and lasting friendship for both of them. I actually have quite a lot of unused writing from the Curio series, which is stored on my computer, most of which was never really used. And some of those details, which do detail more of Abby's life alone before university, in her 4 years, and also in her 4 years of living alone after she leaves it, most of them really focus on Abby's thoughts and Abby's sort of feelings around living in Wootton Dursley with her father, who's a very authoritarian person. Now, I've used some of these bits which have been woven into the later books, or I've alluded to them within the stories. But I do have a lot of kind of the earlier relationship between Birch and Abby at uni. And yeah, maybe at some point I'll actually get around to sort of putting those together properly and sharing them. All of this actually becomes more important as we read the start of Curio's summer, and it shows how much Birch has understood not just Abby, but all of the other Curios. And with her inheritance money from her grandfather Jeff, she invests not in her own future, but also in the future of her friends when she buys a very large house. It's one of the most important parts of the Curio Chronicles, because it's here that really, to a degree, Birch lays out her blueprint for what will become the rest of the Curios series. Abby sits in what is going to be her new home in the library, and she becomes completely overwhelmed by what Birch has actually done. Now, you have to understand that, as crazy as all of this may sound, Abby is just not used to people being kind to her. For her, people are strict and controlling, which is why, to an extent, at times, Abby goes along with things for no other reason than it helps her to be included and to fit in. So when Birch reveals the house, she starts to understand the huge significance of Birch's actions. It's simply too much for Abby to deal with, but Birch understands that, and so she kneels before Abby. Birch, this is the nicest thing that's ever happened to me. My tears exploded out of me. I shook my head. I know it's silly, but it really is amazingly wonderful. She put the box down and swung my chair round to face her, and on her knees, she moved forward and embraced me. This is a new start. No isolation, no loneliness, and a life worth living. We came back to this village side by side and they hated us. Some of them, they hate us more. This is where you and I will live, and I will show them, we will show all of them, that having us here is the best thing this village has ever known. And all of that starts with having a house that's the envy of them all. It's also a house filled with love and friendship. I hope that now you can see why I've done all of this. Dads, just by living a good, happy life, we will prove all of them wrong. It is such a telling moment. As Birch reveals, she's far more aware of all of them than any of them have actually fully understood. I mean, to be honest, it's an act of friendship beyond comprehension. And it also shows how far ahead Birch is actually looking, as she reveals that the house will not just, be a house for Abby. It will also become the sanctuary for Debs, Chloe, Edwina, and Anthony. In Abigail's wedding, at the very start, during Curio Live, it's very clear that Birch intends to do the same for all of those lost and alone faces on what is the Curio Life website, which if you've read book 2, you'll know what that is, because that is what the facilities that they're fundraising for is to Birch. From her point of view, it is a home, a haven, a place to come and feel supported and cared about, just exactly the same as number 3 Waterside Lane in Wootton Dursley. All of the Curios have one thing in common, which is before they all gathered in the church hall that fateful evening, all of them were alone and looking for something more in their lives, but they did not know what that was because society hadn't shown them. Anthony was persecuted and living in fear in his flat because his father threw him out when he discovered that his son was actually gay. His lifeline and his partner at the salon, Delphine, because she's one of his mother's best friend, she really is the most important person in his life at that moment, because she is his only means of talking to his mother, because his father has banned him from the house. I just think about that for a moment and how awful that would actually be. Chloe did not really fit in anywhere. She was a council estate girl, hanging out with the rich kids, and she was struggling to keep up with their ridiculous expectations as they used her as the butt of old jokes, and they got free meals in her parents' restaurant. In her isolation, Chloe has devoted her life to her art, into which she pours all of her love and all of her true feelings as she hooks up with guys to feel validated. Because most women bully her because she's far prettier than they are. And so she paints and has meaningless sex with a lot of men. Now Debbie was bullied for being poor, and it just so happened that her mother married a rich guy, and so she got bullied even more. And she felt isolated because Abby's father, Edwin, was so strict that in order to punish Abby at times, he would ban Debs from seeing her. Her most treasured possession is actually a teddy bear given to her by Bradley, her new stepfather, who treats her like a father really should, which is far more than her physically abusive father ever did. Now Edwina worked herself into the floor to set up her business while she was helping her mother run the restaurant. Her only real friend became her younger sister Chloe, but she hated Chloe's friends, and so she became more and more isolated and alone. The love of her life was the guy who handed her a red flash drive with some code on it, and in a moment of anger a few years later, she dumps him. And she's regretted that moment ever since, and she lives her life in between computer programs, being secretly in love with a man that she fears she is never going to see again, which for Edwina is heartbreaking. Now life for Abby was hard enough before she dyed her hair. Living at home with her parents, her father was controlling and more focused on his own image than anyone else. And if Abby stepped out of line or spoke out of turn, he would then beat her and punish her for it. For Abby, her mother was everything growing up. But once Edwin dragged Felicity into the parish council, Abby saw how her mother changed under the influence of Marjorie and the control of Edwin. And suddenly, she was alone in an oppressive household, running to her sanctuary arch, living in fear and hiding herself out of sight and out of mind, lost in a fantasy of gothic horror novels. All of these stories reflect the world today. There are so many kids out there growing up the same way, unseen, unheard, and disregarded by parents who throw cash at them to shut them up so that the parents can then live the life that they want to without the annoyance of their children getting in the way. The world has become sort of a minefield for the young, as greed and self-indulgence drive the agenda of how it looks is far more important than how it actually is. We've raised a whole generation of children who've had absolutely everything to keep them quiet, except the one thing that they crave the most, which is connection to another living soul, locked away in their digital world, isolated from everything. And it's doing a great deal of harm within society today. You know, there's a lot of talk of children's mental health and its importance. But as Birch points out in the Curio Chronicles, most psychologists are too busy chasing the money offered by social media and the advertising industry, where they are now employed to inflict more harm by designing campaigns and media that coerces and controls the young into believing a narrative that's actually very harmful to them. If you take a look at any social media platform and really analyse it, you will see an awful lot of the messages are very detrimental to the young of today. Take a really good look at all the latest trends where young people are exploited by an app, of which I would probably list TikTok as the most dangerous to young people, as it encourages children into some really unhealthy patterns of life, such as eating disorders or sexual exploitation. Instagram is not really that much better with its army of influencers, all with products and product placement, and they advise the young and the inexperienced to buy these products or use this service to enhance their own life. The influencers are getting very, very rich off the backs of their young viewers. And all of it wears on the soul, and it breeds discontentment in the young because they cannot live up to the expectations set by an influencer with a 6-figure salary. We have young people today caught in a trap, hanging by a thread and clinging to something that gives them hope and a connection to life, as they desperately fight anxiety, depression, eternal dialogue, and dark thoughts. They have no real connection to others who could maybe provide some form of bond of friendship and validation for them, because the sting in the tail is society is actually the isolationist force within society today. I'm not surprised at all that so many of our young crash and end up self-harming and hating themselves. The whole system is now rigged to ensure they do, as the way the carrot of hope gets dangled with yet another useless product that will never help them in front of them. But it's certainly profitable for the businesses. Birch really understands this. She sees how the world is betraying the bonds of trust with children and leading to young adults who end up lost and alone, which I think is why Curio Live is so important to her. If you look at the third book, Curio Christmas, which is, pretty crazy and extreme, Birch actually shows Abby how much she understood all of them as she brought them all together in the house. I put my cup on the island and walked through the hall. Birch was bolting the door, having locked it. She smiled as she took my hand. It's so pretty outside. I know you hate it, but Dad, sweetie, I cannot help it. I love the snow. I held her hand tight and walked up the stairs. I'm glad you love it, Birch. It's a reminder of your home, and that's nice. She stopped, and I turned and looked at her. She looked really serious. Dads, tonight you understood the meaning of Percy. I think you realised he was to her as your Arch is to you. We all have somewhere or something, and it is the safety and security that we need, just like Phileas or even Edwina's flash drive. Have you not seen how protective she is over it? Let me ask you this. Where did I run to when I was afraid? I looked at her and her eyes sparkled with life. She smiled and lifted her free hand to my chest and placed it right in the centre. This is my place of safety. When I'm afraid, I run to you. Upper Mill was where I grew up, but this here, Dads, you, that is my home. I thought you knew that. Through Birch, the others all become connected as they share a space where everything is obvious. So there's really nowhere to hide. And that is actually the power of friendship and being around others. As we see in all of the books, it is normal for one of the characters to turn to the other, look at them and then simply ask, "Is everything all right? You look a little down today." We are social creatures. We need to interact on a personal level. And that can only happen if there are bonds forged through friendship that grows into trust. Today's society actually hampers that because it prioritizes shallowness and fakery, all in the name of image, and how it looks is more important than the truth of how it actually is. Young people are still growing and they're still learning, and they need time to develop the social skills that are required to move through life. And I've shown that in what I've written within the Curio Chronicles. Now, readers may not always agree with some of the antics of the Curios, but they're a really good representation of a section of the young of today. And as we see in the series as it moves onwards, life is hard and does have bumps in the road. But as we age, we learn the skills to deal with each problem as it arises. There's far too much drama today, far too many who are using their platforms to gain while exploiting the vulnerable. Mainstream media, educational facilities, governments, and especially social media are absolutely failing our young in unprecedented numbers. The suicide rate is climbing to match the amount of people living alone. Activists are targeting the unskilled and preaching their dogma to them. And as a result of all of this, we have now got a world which is filled where its young people are struggling to cope in a world that appears more and more dystopian and more isolating. Lack of connection is leading towards a world where people talk a lot less and they communicate only through sound bites in text. And as we see marriages fall out of favour, birth rates are falling. And there are many reasons for all of this stemmed from greed and control. Now, controversial as it may be, the new wave of women's rights has to a degree done a great deal of damage, as young males now live in a world where their value is measured by looks and how much they can spend. And that has led to a decline for those men who are not in the top 2%, who have no hope of living up to most women's unrealistic expectations. And so they have now opted completely out of the dating market. Young women are finding it harder and harder to find a suitable partner. But when they have been taught that only the top 2% are viable, it has now created a situation where the top 2% of men have all of the action that they want. And so they're very unlikely to pick a stable mate, because they're now playing the field, banging as many women as possible. Now, the result of this is women feel bitter towards men and become more resistant to dating, even though deep down inside, they yearn for that true love, fulfilling relationship that they read so much about. But it's not happening. If you throw into the mix gender ideology, which is confusing a lot of our young people who struggle already with bad body image and a sense of identity, add to that a lack of jobs as more and more jobs are taken by the robotic and AI industries, falling wages, rocketing interest rates, and no chance of a mortgage to buy a home in an economy where utilities cost the earth, rents are rising, and food is more and more expensive as the leisure industry, and as is the leisure industry, I should say. And suddenly, any optimism that a young person had in school is very rapidly degrading in every decreasing, spiraling circles, which is leading to a sense of inner hopelessness. The Curio Chronicles was written to show the truth of the thoughts and feelings of the youth of today. In this episode, I've already highlighted yet another aspect contained within the series, as I have in other episodes on this channel, such as the episode focused on the skin we are in. I wrote the series back in 2020, and that was just after I decided to finish counselling after 25 years of working within it as a voluntary counsellor. And as we sit now on the verge of 2024, the numbers of people who are choosing to kill themselves rather than face another isolated day of internal strife has risen again. And I feel that society really is failing them. With the cost of living set as high as it is, as property owners, just live a life where they're lavished in luxury, we're facing a serious problem for a lot of the world. Homelessness is actually on the increase, and yet we're doing exactly what we did to create this problem. We're ignoring the young, who are nowhere near as prepared as they should be by a failing education system, which is far too preoccupied with reputation and data collection than it is actually giving a full education to its pupils. We've always looked to our young as the inspiring leaders of tomorrow, but left to fend for themselves, you've really got to wonder, just what exactly will the future hold if we do not do something now to help those falling behind, lost and alone, catch up? I do feel that the Curio sets an example that can help our younger members to understand the true meaning and value of having close personal friendships built on trust and communication, which is what ultimately the Curio stories are really about, once you get past all of the humour and the sexual referencing. To many people who look at the youth today, they judge them on the life that they have or the way that they dress, but they actually fail to see the turmoil inside them. And as a result, they just simply add to the damage that's already being done. And we see that in Curio's summer. It's there, it's right in front of you. Abby actually talks you through it when she writes, "I miss Birch. She has a busy life. Her text messages are further and further apart. It's been well over a week since her last text, and last night she did not come online and talk to me on a video call. It felt like the end of the world, on a never-ending slide downwards into the abyss of darkness that is my life of utter loneliness. God, I miss her so much. It's hurting deep inside, and I'm not coping at all well. as I cannot stop thinking of her and feel this huge ball of pain inside me. I know she's so disappointed in me. I should have achieved more, but I think I've really let her down and dashed her high hopes for me. Hell, I've let myself down. I miss her so much. Are you going to stand there looking like a sight all day, or will you be moving? You're making the place look untidy. Huh? What? I came out of my thoughts to Marjorie staring at me in her usual disapproving way. She gave a frustrated sigh and she scowled disapprovingly at me. I asked if you'd be moving anytime soon, Abigail Watson. Good grief, just look at you. I understand your absolute lack of care for anything, especially yourself. But in 15 minutes we do have a funeral arriving. Around here it's considered respectful to at least make an effort for the final passing of the deceased. In the books, the Curio website becomes a way that the Curios can have their voices heard in a community that refuses to listen. And as it grows, Birch really starts to understand the full potential of what they've actually built by accident. By taking it forward into a fully registered charity, the Curios are able to take what they've learned living together and seeing the benefits of the bonds that they have formed, which is what they then apply to Curio Live. In Abigail's wedding, Edwina and Abby attend a press conference where they get attacked by the press, and Abby actually has her chance to stand her ground. The only person who actually asks her a decent question is Thomas Jenkins. He is a reporter who, through Abby providing him with an exclusive, actually manages to make it into the mainstream media world, and she responds in a way that allows her to get her point across on behalf of the young. And I really do feel this needs to be spoken more to those who control everything. Thomas Jenkins, Daily Informer. Ladies, I spend a lot of time on your site, and it's clear that there's a gap into which young people are falling. Now, the Curio Group, I know, have fought hard to build their life, so I would ask you both, how can people really help these lost young people out? I smiled at him. Finally, something that would help us, and he knew it. Edwina leaned into the mic. The best way today is to support Curio Live, make a donation, buy some merchandise, and if you cannot do that, go to the site and talk to these people. Give them advice. Ask them how they're doing. And if you know of a charity that supports young people, give them a link or phone number to use. I nodded, agreeing. Thomas, it's nice to have a good question, so thanks for that. Look, a lot of young people are sensitive and insecure, and older people sit in judgment of them because they have a different look or a different attitude. But they never ask why. Not all of us like the same kinds of sex or food or cars, etc. Instead of sitting in judgment because you either do not agree or you do not understand, try having a conversation with them and learn something. You know, I've never met a person yet that does not like being asked, how are you today? Are you going to be fine? It is common sense. Just be respectful and try to understand them. You know what the biggest crime I ever committed in my home village is? I dyed my hair black with red tips when I was 19. I mean, that's it. And it got so bad I considered killing myself. How many of you have dyed or restyled your hair? Was it so bad for you that you wanted to kill yourself? The press, like society, they're really only interested in playing the same sort of blame game as everybody else. And as a result, nothing gets done. Now, it matters not what your age is. You know, at some point, the youth of today will lead us into the future. And the way I see it, keeping them at home locked to their screens will not help if they lack the life skills that they need or the communication abilities to actually be able to voice their inner thoughts and feelings. And in Abigail's wedding, during this press conference, Abby once again, she sets the record straight. Miss Wilkinson, I like your hair. I really love the colour. She gave a smile as the other reporters at the front turned back to look at her. Tell me, Miss Wilkinson, how many times a day do you get told you look like a slut or a whore with that hair? She looked shocked and the reporters gasped. I smiled. Not nice, is it? I've had that pretty much every day since I was 19, and maybe not dyeing it was the answer in your eyes. As for my life being easier, well, I'm sorry, but I cannot agree with you, because when I was a blonde, which is my natural hair colour, and I was at home in my village where I'm supposed to be safe, a man still tried to rape me because he said I looked like a slut. So it appeared to me, blonde or black, made no difference. Tell me, does dyeing it red get you laid more or less? She looked horrified as the cameras turned to her. I stood up and leaned over the microphone. Go look at the sign, read it, then talk to Katie. And if you drop your self-righteous bullshit and trash talk, I will talk to you one-on-one. But you better come up with some serious questions, because these kids are suffering and we're trying to help them, because they damn well need it. So stop wasting our time on your petty, sensational and judgmental bullshit. And when all of you grow the hell up, I will talk real help, real support with all of you. Because that is why me and all of the Curios are here. Not to have our time wasted by a group of patronizing, self-serving bigots. We need to change. We need to lose the self-absorption, throw out the negative politics, and start talking, building bonds, and moving forward to create a better future for everybody. The youth are lost, they're confused, and feeling very isolated and alone. And it is up to all of us really to stand up and start asking why we're leaving them behind, and then actually do something that will help them to catch up. Think about this. No animal abuses its cubs, except for mankind. And that is something as all of us really, should deeply consider. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Once again, I try to keep these things as different as possible. If you're enjoying listening to the episodes that I put together and put out, which are mainly based around my writing and some social commentary, which is the influence behind why I write, please, if you could, subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and that helps me to sort of increase the reach of each episode so that I can get more people listening in. I'm going to be back next week with another look at life, another look at writing, another look at reading, and hopefully I will see all of you then. Thank you, and goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Writer Life podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, or there are areas of Robin's stories you would like him to discuss, please add your thoughts and questions in the comments, and we will include them in a future episode. You can follow Robin on all his social media links, which you will find listed below, and please, like and subscribe to this channel, so you get the latest notifications when he posts. All Robin's books are available in digital and print formats to purchase or download through all online book sales sites.